For decades, the rhythm of progress in personal computing was set by a single, unwavering drumbeat from Santa Clara, California. It was the sound of Moore's law, and its drummer was Intel. This predictable cadence, a biannual doubling of transistor density, dictated the speed, power, and ambition of every machine we used. It was the law of the land, the engine of innovation that powered the digital age. But in November 2020, a different sound emerged. It was a quiet hum from a machine that was impossibly fast, impossibly cool, and powered by a chip that, according to the established order, wasn't supposed to exist. The drumbeat had stopped. In its place was a profound silence, the kind that precedes a revolution. This is the story of how that silence came to be. It is not just the story of one company's fall and another's rise. It is the story of a secret alliance, forged a decade earlier and half a world away, between a design visionary in Cupertino and a manufacturing master in Hsinchu, Taiwan. It is the story of how a handshake deal, born from frustration and necessity, became the most powerful and exclusive partnership in modern technology. How did this symbiotic relationship create a new center of gravity that would dethrone an empire, shatter the dominance of the x86 architecture, and redefine the future of computing? To understand the revolution, one must first understand the crisis that made it necessary. For years, Intel operated on a metronomic model called tick-tock. A tick was a die shrink, moving to a new, smaller, more efficient manufacturing process. A tock was a new microarchitecture built on that existing process, delivering greater performance. This model was the very engine of Moore's law, the promise that powered the entire PC industry. Then, the engine seized. The breakdown began with Intel's 10-nanometer process. It was years behind schedule, a catastrophic failure that broke the tick-tock cadence and left the company stuck on its aging 14-nanometer node for generation after generation of chips. While competitors like Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, TSMC, were pushing ahead, Intel was falling behind its own roadmap, a situation that would have been considered heretical just a few years prior. For Apple, this was more than an inconvenience. It was a strategic disaster. The consequences were felt directly in Apple's flagship products. Premium MacBooks, designed for sleekness and power, were being crippled by Intel's inefficient chips. They ran too hot, forcing aggressive thermal throttling that choked performance. Apple's meticulously planned product roadmap was now held hostage by Intel's manufacturing failures. The problem was compounded by what one former Intel principal engineer described as abnormally bad quality assurance on its Skylake processors, making Apple the #1 filer of problems in the architecture. This technical failure exposed a deeper, more fundamental conflict. Apple's business model is built on selling highly integrated products where the user experience, performance, battery life, thermals, design is paramount. Intel's model is to sell chips as components to a wide array of original equipment manufacturers, OEMs, where raw clock speed and backward compatibility with the vast Windows ecosystem have historically been the primary metrics of success. As Intel's manufacturing prowess faltered, this divergence in philosophy became an existential threat to Apple's brand. The decision to leave Intel wasn't just an option. It was a strategic imperative for survival. The roots of this divorce, however, run even deeper, back to a decision made in 2005 that can only be described as one of the greatest strategic blunders in corporate history. As Apple was secretly developing the original iPhone, it approached its new partner for the Mac, Intel, to build the processor for its revolutionary mobile device. Intel, under then CEO Paul Otellini, passed on the opportunity. Otellini later admitted that Apple was offering a price for the chip that Intel believed was below its own manufacturing cost. Focused on the high-margin PC market, Intel couldn't see the massive volume potential of the iPhone and failed to grasp the paradigm shift that was about to occur. It was a classic case of a market leader being unable to see beyond its current profitable business. Intel's rejection, however, had an unintended and fateful consequence. It forced Apple to build the very capability that would one day become its executioner. With no off-the-shelf solution that met its ambitious requirements for performance and power efficiency, Apple had to create its own silicon design division. In 2008, the company hired Johnny Srouji, an Israeli-born chip designer from Intel and IBM, and tasked him with building a world-class team from scratch. That small team of 40 to 50 engineers would go on to develop the A4, Apple's first custom system on a chip, which powered the original iPad and the iPhone 4. This was the birth of Apple's silicon design arm. Without Intel's original sin, this team, which 12 years later would design the M1 chip that shattered Intel's dominance, might never have existed. The causal chain is direct and profound. Intel's refusal to build a mobile chip for Apple directly led to Apple building the expertise to replace Intel in the Mac. As Apple's internal chip design capabilities grew, its reliance on its chief rival, Samsung, to manufacture the A-series chips became increasingly untenable. Apple needed a new partner, one that could deliver cutting-edge technology at an immense scale without competing with them in the end market. The search led them to Hsinchu, Taiwan, and to one of the semiconductor industry's most revered figures, Morris Chang. Chang had founded TSMC in 1987 on a revolutionary concept, the pure-play foundry. Unlike integrated device manufacturers, IDMs like Intel or Samsung, which design and manufacture their own chips, TSMC would only manufacture chips designed by others. Its motto was simple: "We don't compete with our customers." This model created the fabless semiconductor industry, enabling companies like Nvidia and Qualcomm to focus on design without the colossal expense of building their own fabrication plants, or fabs. The pivotal moment came in 2010 at a surprise dinner at Morris Chang's home, arranged by Foxconn founder Terry Gou. The guest was Apple's then Chief Operating Officer, Jeff Williams. Williams laid out Apple's ambition to find a new manufacturing partner for the iPhone's processor. TSMC saw a potential anchor client of unimaginable scale. Apple saw a partner whose business model was perfectly aligned with its own. The foundation of the deal was trust. This was tested in February 2011, when Apple paused negotiations with TSMC to hear a proposal from Intel, which wanted to become Apple's foundry. For 2 months, the future of the alliance hung in the balance. Finally, Chang met with Tim Cook at Apple's headquarters. Cook offered a critical reassurance, reportedly stating, "Intel just does not know how to be a foundry." Cook, a master of supply chains, understood a crucial distinction. Intel's entire corporate culture was that of a product company, focused on its own roadmap and margins. TSMC's culture was that of a service provider, dedicated to meeting the crazy and irrational demands of its customers. That understanding sealed the deal. The first major test of this new partnership arrived in 2014. At the time, TSMC was planning a strategic leap in its manufacturing technology, intending to jump from its 28-nanometer process directly to a more advanced 16-nanometer process featuring FinFET transistors, a new three-dimensional transistor architecture. This was TSMC's roadmap for the future. Apple, however, had a different plan. For its upcoming A8 chip, destined for the iPhone 6, Apple demanded a custom, intermediate 20-nanometer planar process. It was a half-step, a detour from TSMC's grand vision. With limited research and development resources, TSMC faced a stark choice: stick to its own roadmap or cater to the demands of its new, high-volume partner. In a move that would define the relationship for the next decade, TSMC made a colossal bet-the-company decision. It shelved its own 16-nanometer roadmap and dedicated its entire R&D and capital resources to delivering the 20-nanometer process Apple wanted. This decision cemented the alliance. It proved to Apple that TSMC was not merely a supplier, but a true strategic partner, willing to align its entire corporate strategy with Apple's product goals. This pivot also established the powerful, symbiotic financial feedback loop that would propel the alliance to industry dominance. Apple's predictable, massive, and high-margin iPhone business provided TSMC with the guaranteed revenue stream it needed to fund its colossal, multi-billion-dollar capital expenditures on future, unproven process nodes. Apple's scale wasn't just buying chips, it was underwriting the bleeding edge of semiconductor R&D, concentrated in a single, dedicated partner. The explosive growth of the iPhone directly fueled TSMC's ability to invest in the future, creating a virtuous cycle that would leave competitors in the dust. With a manufacturing partner secured, Johnny Srouji's Silicon team in Cupertino embarked on a decade-long project that would, in hindsight, look like a dress rehearsal for the Mac. While the PC world remained obsessed with raw clock speeds and gigahertz, Apple focused on a different, more challenging metric: performance per watt. This was a necessity born from the constraints of a smartphone, which must deliver incredible power within a tiny thermal envelope and without draining the battery in an hour. From the A4 to the A14, each generation of Apple's A-series chips delivered massive leaps in performance. Year-over-year Geekbench scores showed a relentless upward march that consistently outpaced the competition from Qualcomm and Samsung. Key architectural milestones marked this journey. The A7 chip in the iPhone 5S was the world's first 64-bit smartphone processor, a move that shocked the industry and set the stage for more powerful software. The A11 Bionic introduced the Neural Engine, a dedicated processor for machine learning tasks that powered features like Face ID and became a cornerstone of Apple's on-device AI strategy. With each iteration, Apple's engineers refined their designs, adding more CPU and GPU cores, expanding cache sizes, and perfecting the intricate dance between hardware and software. The conventional wisdom in the chip industry was that you design powerful, hot-running desktop processors and then scale them down for laptops and mobile devices, inevitably making compromises along the way. Apple, by necessity, did the exact opposite. It spent a decade mastering the art of building hyper-efficient, yet incredibly powerful CPU cores for the iPhone. They had already solved the hardest engineering problem: power efficiency. When the time came to design a chip for the Mac, they weren't scaling down a power-hungry architecture. They were scaling up a supremely efficient one, unleashing it in a laptop chassis with a far more generous power and thermal budget. This gave them an insurmountable architectural advantage. This design prowess was only half of the equation. The other half was TSMC's ability to turn these ambitious blueprints into hundreds of millions of flawless silicon wafers. The scale of the iPhone created a unique dynamic. Each new iPhone launch represented the single largest volume deployment of a new process node in the history of computing. When TSMC introduced its 7-nanometer process, the Apple A12 Bionic was the first chip to be manufactured on it, a full year before competitors like AMD could access the technology for their own products. The same pattern repeated with the 5-nanometer process and the A14 Bionic in the iPhone 12. Apple's massive, predictable orders gave TSMC the confidence to invest billions in these new, unproven nodes. This relationship did more than just fund R&D, it served as a real-world, high-stakes proving ground. The immense volume of iPhone production, often exceeding 200 million units annually, allowed TSMC to rapidly ramp up, identify and fix defects, and perfect the manufacturing yield of each new, mind-bogglingly complex process. By the time other fabless companies like AMD or Nvidia gained access to that same node a year later, TSMC had already mastered it, courtesy of Apple. In effect, Apple was not just TSMC's biggest customer, it was its integrated, high-volume quality assurance partner. This de-risked the bleeding edge of semiconductor manufacturing at a scale no other company could match, giving the alliance an unassailable lead. On November 10, 2020, Apple held a virtual event to announce the first Macs powered by its own silicon. The star of the show was a chip called the M1. The presentation focused on concepts that were foreign to most PC users, but had been the foundation of Apple's mobile chips for years. The M1 was a system on a chip, a design that integrates all the major components of a computer onto a single piece of silicon. This included the central processing unit, CPU, the graphics processing unit, GPU, the neural engine for AI tasks, I/O controllers, and security hardware. This tight integration dramatically reduces the physical distance data has to travel, boosting speed and efficiency. The most revolutionary aspect of the M1's architecture was its Unified Memory Architecture UMA. In a traditional PC, the CPU and GPU have their own separate pools of memory. When the GPU needs data that the CPU has been working on, that data must be copied from one pool to the other, a process that introduces latency and consumes power. The M1's UMA creates a single, high-speed pool of memory that is accessible to all components on the chip simultaneously. There is no copying. This simple but profound change eliminates a major bottleneck, resulting in a massive boost to both performance and efficiency. Finally, the M1's CPU employed the same big dot little design philosophy perfected in the A series. It featured 4 Firestorm high-performance cores for demanding tasks like video editing or code compilation, and 4 Ice Storm high-efficiency cores for background tasks like checking email or playing music. The operating system intelligently and seamlessly assigns tasks to the appropriate core, maximizing performance when needed and sipping power when not. Apple's performance claims were so extraordinary that they were met with widespread skepticism. But then, the first independent reviews were published, and the tech world was stunned. Deep-dive technical analyses from outlets like AnandTech confirmed that Apple had not just met expectations, it had shattered them. The benchmark results were staggering. The M1 chip in the MacBook Air, a fanless, thin and light laptop, was not only crushing Intel's contemporary mobile chips, like the Core i7 Tiger Lake, in both single-core and multi-core tests, but it was doing so while consuming a tiny fraction of the power. More astonishingly, a single Firestorm performance core in the M1 was trading blows with the fastest desktop CPUs from Intel and AMD, chips that consumed many times more power. The M1 was not a miracle. It was the inevitable, logical culmination of the Alliance's decade-long journey. The power-efficient core architecture was a direct descendant of the designs perfected in the A-series chips. The unified memory architecture was a benefit only achievable through Apple's complete vertical integration of hardware, software, and silicon design. And, most critically, this entire revolutionary design was only physically possible because it was manufactured on TSMC's cutting-edge 5-nanometer process, a node that was mature, high-yield, and ready for mass production precisely because it had already been used to produce hundreds of millions of A14 chips for the iPhone 12. The M1 wasn't just an Apple chip, it was the ultimate expression of the Apple-TSMC alliance. The alliance's greatest strength, the hyper-concentration of the world's most advanced chip manufacturing in a single company, is also its greatest vulnerability. Today, over 90% of the world's most advanced logic chips, those at 7 nanometers and below, are manufactured in one place, Taiwan. This reality has given rise to the silicon shield theory, the idea that Taiwan's indispensable role in the global technology supply chain makes it too important to the world economy for China to risk a military invasion. Whether this shield is a deterrent or a target, it places Apple and the entire technology industry on a geopolitical fault line. A conflict in the Taiwan Strait would instantly halt the production of nearly every advanced electronic device on the planet, from iPhones and data center servers to modern cars and medical equipment. This creates a strategic paradox. The old Intel-dominated world, for all its stagnation, was geographically diversified, with advanced fabs in the United States, Israel, and Ireland. The New World Order, architected by the Apple-TSMC alliance, is built on a foundation of incredible efficiency, but also unprecedented fragility. Tim Cook's mastery of the supply chain has created a system that is optimized to perfection, but is also balanced precariously on the most volatile geopolitical location on Earth. The partnership that gave Apple ultimate control over its product destiny has also tied its fate, and by extension, the fate of the global tech economy, to a single potential point of failure. The M1 revolution sent shockwaves through the industry, triggering a new arms race. Intel, under new leadership, has embarked on an ambitious and costly comeback strategy. It has launched its own foundry service, aiming to manufacture chips for other companies, including potential rivals like Qualcomm and even Apple. Bolstered by billions of dollars in subsidies from the US CHIPS Act, Intel is building new, advanced fabs in Arizona and Ohio, with the explicit goal of becoming the American TSMC and reclaiming process technology leadership by 2025. Meanwhile, Apple's traditional competitors are scrambling to catch up. Qualcomm, with its Snapdragon X Elite, and AMD, with its Ryzen AI Max chips, are racing to create their own integrated SoCs that can match the performance per watt of Apple Silicon. They are licensing ARM's core designs and leveraging TSMC's manufacturing prowess to close the gap. However, these competitors fundamentally lack Apple's two key advantages. First is complete vertical integration, the seamless control over the hardware, the operating system, and the chip design itself. Second is the business model. Apple sells a high-margin, fully integrated product, an iPhone or a Mac. It can afford to design massive, complex chips because the cost is absorbed into the price of the final device. Competitors like AMD and Qualcomm sell chips as components to OEMs like Dell and HP, who operate on razor-thin margins and are intensely price-sensitive. This reveals that the competitive moat Apple has built is deeper than just silicon. A Qualcomm chip, no matter how well designed, will always be a component in a Windows laptop built by a third party. It can never achieve the level of hardware-software optimization that Apple can, because Apple is its own, and only, customer. The M-series chips are not just fast because they are well designed. They are fast because macOS is designed for them, and vice versa. This deep integration is the true advantage, and it is one that competitors, by their very business models, cannot easily cross. As the industry looks to the future, the pace set by the Apple-TSMC alliance shows no signs of slowing. In mid-2025, Apple is preparing to launch its M5 family of chips, while TSMC is on track for high-volume production of its groundbreaking 2nm N2 process. Beyond that, TSMC's roadmap already details its 1.6nm A16 process, slated for late 2026, which will introduce next-generation technologies like backside power delivery to further push the boundaries of performance and efficiency. The relentless innovation is powered by new transistor architectures, like Gate-All-Around GAA, which will replace the FinFET design that has been the industry standard for over a decade. With the M5 expected to be built on TSMC's 2nm process, the alliance is poised to extend its technological lead for years to come. Moore's law, the old law of the land, may be slowing down, but the Apple-TSMC alliance has created its own, more potent cadence of progress. The predictable annual rhythm of generational leaps in performance and efficiency is the new law of computing, and it is dictated not from Santa Clara, but by the lockstep innovation of Cupertino and Hsinchu. The Intel empire, built on the foundations of the x86 architecture and Moore's law, was not dethroned by a single rival, but by a complete paradigm shift orchestrated by a symbiotic alliance. This new empire is more powerful, more efficient, and more deeply integrated than anything that came before. But it is also more centralized and more fragile. The very partnership that gave Apple ultimate control over its destiny has also concentrated the world's technological future onto a single island in the Pacific. The question is no longer who will build the future of computing, but whether that future, so brilliantly designed and flawlessly executed, is built on solid ground.